We first started canoeing in Scotland over 10 years ago when we lived in the Scottish Highlands, and we paddled a fair few of the northern lochs, but there were a number of places that we didn't get around to exploring. So in June 2021 we decided to head north again and to tick a few more off the list. We'd start by heading up the west coast up into the Inverpolly Nature Reserve and then return via Glen Affric and the Great Glen. The trip wasn't about hard, grueling, long-distance paddles or trying to conquer the elements or to put ourselves against Mother Nature. Instead, it was an opportunity to explore some of the more remote lochs, to enjoy some wild camping and to just sit back and enjoy the nature and the unique landscapes of this part of northern Scotland. First up on the list was Loch Marie. We arrived late and paddled along the southern shore towards the west into a fairly stiff breeze. We unloaded the canoe and set up camp on a small outcrop, making sure that we had a view of the mighty Sioch that dominates the skyline towards the east of the loch. We used the DD Pyramid XL tent for this camp. It's one of two tents that we brought with us. The DD tent is quite small, so we would only use it if the weather was going to be fine. The main attraction of Loch Marie are the many wooded islands in the middle of the loch, but we didn't get to explore them this time, as there are endangered black-throated divers nesting at this time of year, so camping on the islands is discouraged. So this was just a quick overnight visit, and we'll need to return at some point to explore the islands, but it was just enough to give us a taste of what was to come in the days ahead. After a breakfast of coffee and porridge, we loaded up the canoe. We'd switched over from using dry bags to canoe barrels to store the bulk of our gear for this trip. We also fitted a Northwater spray deck. This was in anticipation of a trip we have planned to northern Scandinavia, so we viewed this trip as a test run. The spray deck is excellent, and it's not only good for keeping water out, but it also makes paddling in windy conditions much easier, as it prevents the wind from catching the inside of the boat. We drove north along winding single-track roads until we reached the put-in at a small loch that lies to the west of Boat Bay and Loch Sionascaig. The sun was shining and we noticed a sun-soaked beach a short paddle from where we had launched the boat. It looked like a perfect place to camp, so we pitched our old Vango tent, which, to be honest, really needed a good airing after it had sat in the loft for around 10 years. The wind wasn't too strong, so we just pegged the tent out with rocks, which seemed to do the trick. And then it was time to just sit back and enjoy the sunshine. It was still when we woke up the following morning, but the wind soon picked up. The wind was our enemy on the water, but our friend on the land. As we portaged the few hundred metres into Boat Bay, the strong breeze kept the insects away. The wind also helped keep us cool as we heaved our gear through the undergrowth. We didn't plan on doing too many portages on this trip, but the few that we did do really got us thinking about lightening the load for the next trip. As soon as we packed up and got into the water, the wind started to howl. So much so that Loch Sionascaig was blown out and we had to head back into the relative shelter of Boat Bay. The last weather report we looked at warned us of 2 days of heavy winds and rain, so we decided to pitch up, secure the canoe and sit the weather out. We couldn't really complain about the scenery though. We were at the edge of the NW Highlands Geopark, a landscape recognised by UNESCO as one of the most outstanding on the planet. The peaks we could see in the distance, such as Inverpolly, Culmore and Suilven, consist of 1,000 million year old Torridonian sandstone. For the next week or so we would travel through this truly ancient and captivating landscape. The following day wasn't too bad in terms of the weather, so we were able to get out and explore parts of Loch Sionascaig. I was also able to collect some fuel for the gilly kettle. We'd use this throughout the trip for a warm lochside shower. However, the bad weather would return.
Well, it's another classic summer's morning up here in the Highlands of Scotland. It's windy, it's raining, and there's pretty much zero visibility, which is a bit of a downer really, because we had a fairly busy day planned for today. We were going to load the canoe up, portage back into the other loch, cross that loch, get the car, then drive around to Loch and paddle up there for the night. But I don't know if it's worth doing it in this rain and this wind. But last night it was pretty windy and it rained a lot, and the tent leaked. There was water ingress in the sleeping area, and when I woke up this morning and got out of that sleeping area, this porch area was just like a paddling pool. The water has just got in, and I'm not really sure how it happened, but my wellies found the way outside, so they were full of water as well. So we're not off to the best of starts, but this is the Scottish Highlands, and this is what happens. But by lunchtime we could have blue skies and the wind could have dropped. You don't really know up here. You get all seasons in one day.
Well, the blue sky didn't show up, so we packed up and we got going in the wind and the rain. The plan for this part of the trip was to paddle down the Ledmore River and explore Loch, then portage over the falls into Loch Veyatie, where we would paddle the length of the loch, exploring the many bays and inlets. The route down the Ledmore River was easy enough, but once we got into the river mouth we had to sit out the wind for a while. Then we had to get out and pull the canoe over a large sandbank, and once we got past that obstacle it was plain sailing up to the top of the loch. It's only a 3-kilometre paddle to reach the top, where we found a sandy bay to pitch the tent for the night. The wind would die right down most evenings and the midges would begin to make an appearance. so we would often collect dry sticks along the way to create a small contained fire using the gilly kettle base. This seemed to work really well in keeping the insects at bay. So we've been making our way down Loch in near perfect conditions. If you can see the stillness of the water behind me, we couldn't imagine this yesterday on our way up the loch. Fantastic. I think we're about halfway down now, and then we'll begin to look for the portage into Loch Veyatie. But this is beautiful. The portage over the falls and into Loch Veyatie is easy enough to locate if you just follow the sound of the crashing water. The calm conditions we experienced on Loch soon evaporated and the breeze picked up once again. There's very little land that lies between here and the Atlantic Ocean, so the area is prone to the Atlantic weather fronts which can come in almost the blink of an eye. However, we had a couple of days to spend on the loch, so we were in no hurry. We quickly found a good grassy area to pitch the tent, and it was another relaxing evening with a great sunset thrown in for good measure. So we had a peaceful night last night. The wind died right down, the midges came out in the droves, but we've woke up this morning to a fairly stiff breeze. The wind's coming in a northwesterly direction straight off the Atlantic, and it's bringing with it some really cold air. Hence I've got a big thick fleece on, my jacket and a woolly hat. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I've just wandered over to this beach here with a dry bag to collect some driftwood, because I'm going to need a shower soon. We're into day 8 of the trip. I've managed to get a couple of lochside washers, but I'm going to collect some wood to use with the gilly kettle to heat some water up, and if we manage to break camp today and head up into the loch, I'll find somewhere sheltered and get a wash. After a lazy morning, we got back on the water. Loch Veyatie is a great loch with plenty of interest. There are numerous sheltered bays and beaches to explore, all under the watchful eye of the surrounding mountains. We bumped into a couple of fishermen who were up visiting from England, and these guys go all over in search of big fish. We chatted for a while and they told me of trips they'd done to Canada, tales of being dropped off by plane in the remote backcountry to fish a stretch of the Yukon River. These guys were real adventure fishermen. They came to Inverpolly every year to fish these waters though, which gives you an indication of how good the fishing is in this area.
So it's evening time and I've poured my evening wine. So we managed to make it up to the top of Loch Veyatie today, into a stiff headwind, but it was manageable. A lot easier than what it was yesterday. We only encountered a few white caps, white horses on the waves today. Yesterday it was a bit of a struggle. So we managed to get up here without too much issue, and there's some good bays to explore on the way up as well. And then once you get to the top of the loch, it's, I think this is the best campsite we've had so far on the trip, and we've had a few good ones. You don't really know which way to point your chair. You've got Suilven there, which is at the moment covered in mist. You've got a fantastic view up the river there, up towards Loch Fionn. You've got mountains there, and then obviously you've got a view straight down Loch Veyatie. But yeah, fantastic. I would really love to explore up in Loch Fionn, but I think we're going to have to wait for another time to do that because we're running out of supplies. We've kind of eaten our provisions a bit too early. It's because it's pretty hungry work, this canoe camping business. You can only carry so much food, so we're going to have to perhaps head back to the truck tomorrow to restock. We may come back out on this loch because it is fantastic, but we'll just have to see what the weather does. I really hope that I really hope the wind direction doesn't turn, so we have to paddle down into the wind. At the moment there's just a gentle breeze, a westerly or a northwesterly heading down the loch.
We broke camp after a warm shower that morning, and thankfully the wind was behind us as we paddled the 7 kilometres back down the loch. It was a shame to leave, but we needed to head on. We would load the canoe back on the truck and head east towards an entirely different landscape. On our second day in Glen Affric, it was clear that we had entered a more favourable weather system. The wind and the rain we encountered in the west became a distant memory, and our focus turned towards preventing sunburn and finding shade from an increasingly hot sun. Glen Affric is often described as the most beautiful glen in Scotland, and it's pretty hard to disagree. The glen contains a large area of ancient Caledonian pine woods, but also contains a number of broadleaf species such as birch, willow and alder. The area is part of a rewilding project which aims to regenerate the Caledonian pine forests, and paddling alongside the banks gives you some indication of how the land might have looked before the dawn of agriculture and the mass deforestation of the land that followed. One noticeable feature of the loch are the tree root skeletons that can be found all along the shoreline. These gnarly root formations seem to be majestically preserved, and they can also be found under the surface of the water near shore, so it's wise to keep an eye out for them. But after we'd explored for a while, we set up camp and enjoyed another evening of remarkable scenery. We ended up spending a few days in the glen, enjoying the good weather and exploring the shoreline. There are a few good options for tent camping, but often the banks are either sandy or muddy. However, there are endless options for hammock camping. But after one last camp, the time came to head further south. So we've just arrived at Loch Lochy. Now this is part of the Great Glen Canoe Trail, and you rarely see it this flat. I mean, it's almost glass. Really nice paddling conditions, barely a breath of wind. So we've left the truck at a car park back there, and we're just going to head down the side of the loch and find somewhere to camp for a couple of nights. But unbelievable conditions. I've yet to paddle on this loch, but I've driven past it plenty of times and it's never looked as inviting as this.
well, it's about 6 AM here on Loch Lochy. It's not the quietest of lochs. You've got the, I think it's the Great Glen Way, which is just behind where we camped, which is a long distance trail. And you've also got the, this is part of the Great Glen Canoe Trail, which is a fairly long and uninspiring route through the Great Glen, taking in Loch Lochy, Loch Ness and parts of the Caledonian Canal. So yesterday we saw a fair few groups coming through who were doing that route. And then of course you've got the A82 road over there, so you've got constant traffic noise, sound of engines all day and all night long. So it's a bit of a change from where we were up in the northwest, in the kind of empty part of Scotland, up those lochs, which are really fantastic, and I guess well worth the drive up there. We'll have coffee, we'll load the canoe up and head back to the truck, and then unfortunately that's the trip over for us. We've had a good couple of weeks, really enjoyed it actually. It's been fantastic, such a great experience to get up into the northwest and to paddle those lochs. The weather is probably not always going to be on your side, but you just have to take what Mother Nature throws at you. But we've had a good time. Of course we've had some sunshine as well, got a bit of sunburn. It actually rained last night for the first time in a week, so we've been quite lucky in that respect. So yeah.
It was time for one last paddle. We didn't hurry as we tried to soak up the final stretch of the trip before loading the canoe and reluctantly drawing a line under this adventure. So thanks for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch up with you again in the next one.